Most companies want recurring revenue. They don't know how to get it. Jeff Maines does. Jeff's built, scaled, exited 5 of his own companies, and he's advised hundreds of more companies on how to succeed by applying what he calls the SaaS mindset. So we'll get into what that really means, the difference between recurring revenue and recurring value, and how to design your company to scale without breaking it. I'm Bryon Morrison. Let's get to the leaders list.
Everything is happening through these screens.
How are we getting the most out of that person?
I want to see this thing grow long term.
Amazing story. You have such a unique perspective on that.
Schedule a 2-week vacation.
I applaud those models.
Undervalue, secure your digital footprint as well.
Why were they even put in place in the first place?
Only the most adaptable survive. Let's get to the leaders list. Jeff Maines, thanks for joining us on the leaders list today.
Thanks, Bryon. It's great to be here.
Yeah, you are a really interesting guy. I'm going to ask you to give a little background on yourself, but it'll be, you're an author, you're an entrepreneur, you've got a strategic mastermind, you got a whole bunch of things going on. So just tell us a little bit about who Jeff Maines is.
Sure. Well, I help leaders scale world-class companies and achieve dream exits without sacrificing their lives or sanity. At the same time, I've made tons and tons of mistakes across multiple companies. I built 5, sold 4, and made all those mistakes just so you don't have to. And then in that work kind of with 3 groups, B2B SaaS founders scaling 1 to 10 million, their entire executive teams leading companies 10 to 50 and more. And, professional services firms that are turning their IP into SaaS, or, traditional B2B companies that are applying SaaS principles to create recurring revenue and explode their enterprise value.
That's awesome. And in that process, you've written a couple of books.
Yes.
See those behind you, right? So Small Fish, Big Pond. And then did you just launch the Captain's Keys?
Yes, I did. It launched in August of 25. So just a little earlier this summer.
That's great. And tell everybody a little bit about how did you get into the writing piece? Were you always, a content leader? Did you like to develop that, or was it just kind of you wrote down everything you were learning as you went?
No, it's not something I necessarily set out to do. But just so many people ask me to write. It's like, hey, you need to write this down. You've got to write a book. And I was like, I don't want to write a book. And finally, I said yes, and had a publisher that really kind of pushed me out of my comfort zone to do it, and enjoyed the process. And so that was really fun. That was Small Fish, Big Pond. And then I thought, maybe I'll do another one. And it's one of those, maybe have a baby, and then it's like a little while later, it's like, let's do this again.
Yeah,
and
you forget the pain.
You forget about all the pain.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. And so a few years later, I did, and really the second book, The Captain's Keys, is 4 other leaders, and it's really to solve the loneliness crisis, loneliness epidemic that we deal with as leaders. Everybody's probably heard the phrase, "It's lonely at the top," and that's because it's kind of lonely at the top. And what it does is it lays out a framework of building a support system for yourself. It's the 4 people every successful leader needs, and helps you kind of figure out what roles do I have today, what roles maybe are missing, and how do I create that support for myself so that I can support others really, really well. There's a lot of times the biggest threat isn't market competition, it's isolation, or kind of the lone wolf CEO mentality. And that's just expensive therapy waiting to happen.
Yeah, for sure. And do you find, it's interesting. I just interviewed somebody yesterday that was talking about like the number one thing that a business can do is go establish their advisory board. And I think part of that is about escaping that isolation. And, Proxy, my organization, we are all about being the right hand to the executive, because they often don't have people that they can talk to. And somebody be honest with them and understand their environment really well. But I would imagine that that's part of the champion leaders group, right? The leadership group is creating that kind of camaraderie, or is that more of a mastermind and learning environment?
It's a combination of both, because I think either one of those in isolation is really missing pieces. Because there's some great networking groups out there, there's great coaching out there, but when you have those in isolation, it has limited value. I think when you put them together, that's when magic really happens. And so having, people who have been on the same journey you're on, and it's myself and other expert leaders, kind of a fractional C-suite to be able to ask questions of things that LLMs don't know. You can't just go ask ChatGPT, what's my next step? But having that guidance is really important, and then be able to have a cohesive way to increase enterprise value, so that the multiple actually matches their potential. And then the networking piece of that, and having the community is the kind of expertise systems, and the community of working with other scaling founders, that they can do that without losing their mind. So it doesn't have to be lonely at the top, because I think having that community and other people you can talk to that get it is so important.
Yeah. And did you go through that experience and find community in some capacity, and that's where you started to recognize that, or are you just a natural you know uh, behavioral scientist?
No, not a behavioral scientist. Some of it was looking back over my own journey, and I had amazing mentors. And so that was one of the things that really changed the trajectory of my life. No question about that, at all. And so it's, how could I pay that forward? And then, leading companies, really experiencing that loneliness myself, and just kind of like you said, it's living it, and then looking for that community. And so that's another thing that has been absolutely transformational in my success, is having my own community, working with other founders that are doing incredible things, super generous, who can tell me what's working in their business today, and kind of help me with what my right next step is, and then I can help other people. And so that was something that I wanted to take and kind of move out, and specifically into the SaaS space, and help other companies do that, kind of on the same journey together.
Yeah, and you're in the middle of building another firm right now, right? With another SaaS company, Intelligent Contacts.
Yes. Yeah. We were about 10 years old, 130 people. Great company, kind of on the business side of healthcare. So we fix the billing process for hospitals, health systems, and make it as great as the care experience itself.
That's not really a problem, is it? Billing in healthcare? No, I'm
Oh
kidding.
my gosh. If there's a problem to be solved in healthcare, that's it. Is
Yeah,
the whole financial side and transactions. And every time I say something like that, people are like, "Oh my gosh, you got to talk to my hospital. You got to talk to my doc."
yeah. For
And
the
so
love of
those
God,
are
would you
great.
please fix this immediately? Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. And
So
so
you guys been around about 10 years.
yes.
Tell me about, like, how would you describe your growth stage today?
It's all bootstrapped, which I love bootstrap
Okay.
founders. I've funded companies just about every way you can imagine. And again, some of those have been really, really good, and some of them have been, really terrible, not
Mhm.
great ideas. And so, what is our growth stage? We're certainly scaling. We've done very, very well over the years, and just company size, and the people, and the market that we're in. The TAM is enormous, and it's a problem that desperately needs to be solved. So you were certainly scaling stage.
Okay.
But if you think about, like, what would that be in funding? It probably like a Series B, C, somewhere in there.
Sure, sure. But at this stage with 130, you're probably at a stage where you're thinking more about the leadership team. You're establishing uh, your next in command. You're building out the ability for them to be able to execute. Probably identifying what great looks like in each one of those functional areas.
Yes.
Seem right?
Absolutely, and that's something is probably 5, 6 years ago. Really started building kind of the next level leadership team. So we had people that were more kind of department heads, and then having
Yeah.
people that you're really more thinking strategically. And that's one of the things that stops companies from scaling, is the company will rarely outgrow the leader. And it's something that is was difficult for me in every single company I've run. This is number 5, and it's kind of the same lessons over again sometimes. Of you just hit a ceiling, and that's typical, and we see this all the time. Companies scaling to 10 million, they get stuck around 1, they get stuck 3 to 5, 4 seems to be the magic number, and they get stuck there. They get stuck again somewhere around 7. And so there's strategic shifts to make on the way to 10. And one of those is building the leadership team. Stop trying to do everything yourself. Focus on the things that you're really, really good at as a leader, and hire people who have that expertise in other areas. And then there's kind of the second layer of that. So you have your executive team, your leadership team, but then it's pretty easy to have culture and values and the idea, kind of the mission, vision of the company through one layer of management. But then you have a second layer or a third layer. And so it's a different leadership challenge to lead through people instead of just lead people. And so I think it's really interesting just to see that dynamic, and having grown through it, even recently, of how do we keep that cohesive culture and keep everybody really focused on what we're doing in the mission vision of the company,
Hmm.
and maintain that culture as we scale up, as I'm leading through people, as I only have a handful of direct reports and everybody else is reporting to somebody else. And then add on top of that remote. And I think that just adds another layer of complexity when you have remote teams, or you're in multiple locations, or even multiple countries.
Yeah. And are those the things you would say are on your leaders list right now? Is that what you're focused on, or what are the big priorities that you're dealing with?
Uh, Big priorities. One is, I think a lot of the companies that we work with come from a technical background. And
Mhm.
so the problem is always the product. And so it's, I've got to make the product better. That's when we don't have sales, or that's why growth is not happening. And so they'll hit essentially a revenue ceiling, and growth is stalled, and they're focused on the product and making it better, but it's really focusing on distribution, and getting the sales and marketing, getting multiple channels that are working. So feeling a little bit stuck at a certain revenue level, that's something that we deal with a lot. Another one is feeling like the world's best kept secret. And again, they see other companies that are have inferior products that are passing them up. And they're like, well, what's up with that? How can somebody buy that? Because I've got something that's so much better. But the problem is nobody knows about it. And so
Yeah.
again, kind of focusing on that distribution. And then the other side of that would be, maybe things are going really well. Maybe you're that company that is passing everybody up, and the calendar is completely full, and you've got no time to do anything else. The business is consuming your life, and I've been there. And so, those are things that we certainly want to solve, to get companies growing again, get them scaling, get them visible, and to have really build a true enterprise without it consuming everything about them. So instead of saying, hey, someday when I achieve X, then I will whatever, we want them to do the then I will now at the same time, and really live their life and enjoy it, not just be so consumed by the business. And those two things are not mutually exclusive. You can actually have an incredible business
I agree.
and a life.
Yeah, I agree. You know, so going back to your own situation, like I see that's what Champion Leadership Group is dealing with. How do you manage? I thought what you were going to say was on your leaders list is I've got another book, I'm launching another company, I've got another mastermind. So how do you manage all of the different priority and pull, and then how do you argue back when somebody says, if you just focused on one thing, you'd probably be pretty great at that?
I think there's a lot of truth to that, and that is actually one of the things that I teach as well, is hyper focus. And then at some point, for example, how do I balance this? And people ask this all the time. And one, I have amazing teams in both organizations, and
Hmm.
so the things that I do are the things that only I can do. And really, I have to, every quarter I'm looking at all the things that I'm doing, and figuring out what is it that I've picked back up that somebody else can do, because that's so easy to do. And really focus on where do I bring the most value to the business? What is it that I can do that nobody else can? And that's a handful of things. And really want to focus in and put all my energy on the things that have the most value for the business, and not get caught in all the day-to-day minutia of things that somebody else can do. They can be very important things, but they're
Hmm.
not the best use of my time. And so I think that's part of it, is having amazing teams that I can delegate to, and that really care as much about the business as I do.
Love it. I love it. So your focus, you have a huge focus on helping non-tech CEOs learn from the SaaS playbook. What
Yes.
inspired that? Because I mean, I spent a little time in SaaS. You have different business principles, and it's very metrics driven business. So I immediately get that connection. But talk a little bit more about like how you help people get into that SaaS mindset.
Sure. I think the light bulb moment is realizing that recurring revenue and recurring value aren't the same thing. I mean, you can have a subscription model and still operate like a transactional business. And the mindset shift isn't about what you charge or how you charge. It's about how you think about customer success and scalability and enterprise value from as early as possible. And I think that the big shift is that traditional businesses will optimize for the sale, and where a SaaS is going to optimize for the outcome. And the difference when you optimize for the sale, your best customers and your worst customers kind of have the same experience. You're incentivized to close deals, not deliver results. We just got to get them across the finish line. Team celebrates revenue day one and kind of moves on, and the customer hasn't gotten value yet. And here's the killer. Enterprise value is capped because investors can't predict future performance because every deal is a one-off. And
Mhm.
I think that the SaaS mindset flips this. Revenue day one is just permission to prove yourself. The recurring business model is about compounding value that you deliver over months and years. And I think that changes probably everything about the business, your metrics, your team structure, your sales process. And most importantly, your enterprise value multiple, because when you have that recurring revenue, that changes.
Yeah. Well, so that also leads you into something that I know you talk a lot about, and I love is the world-class customer experience, and how
Yes.
that becomes a competitive moat. So is that really mostly mindset? Is that what a company has to do? If they say, I want to hang my hat on customer service, you know how many people, say customer service matters,
Yes.
and
Yes.
then and they use the right words, but they don't really have exceptional customer service. Like, what's the difference?
I think that the difference, maybe it is mindset, but it's in outcome. Because customer service is very generic, and
Mm.
it's everybody says that we have great service. And okay, fine, but what does that really look like? And I think replace that word service for success. And I tell CEOs all the time is they need to be able to answer the question: what does success look like for a customer? 30 days, 60 days, 90 days
Yeah.
after the sale. And if you don't know, you don't have a growth platform. You got a
Mhm.
sales machine and going to have a retention problem. And that directly impacts what a business is worth. But I think having very defined markers, what does it look like? What value do we deliver, and what does that outcome look like? So what does good service look like? What does onboarding look like? What are the markers of success, and how quickly can you deliver those? We definitely want wins within 30 days, but what win can you deliver in the first hour, 2 hours, seven
Yeah.
days, 3 days? What do those look like? And really focusing in on what does that outcome, specific outcome look like? That's what customer success looks like. That's what great service looks like. That's where people go, wow, you got to check this out, because they know the difference. It's not just saying, hey, we have great service, but it's being able to clearly articulate what does it mean to win by having you.
Yeah. Man, that's great. So how much of that, that's an easy theory to understand, right? And so what are the tactical steps that you take people through to help them? Is it literally identifying like first hour, first day, first week, first quarter success? Because I think I mean, that makes a ton of sense. It's not terribly different than when we take a company through journey mapping, and
Sure.
they say we have great customer service, and we go, great. How many touches do you have with the client? And they go, well, it depends. And we're like, well, it doesn't. I mean, like
It
you
doesn't.
you do
That's right.
you do know when you should Like if you don't know when the fourth contact is the most important contact, then you haven't mapped that out and you haven't thought about it. So do you have some tool, technique, approach that you take people through to get to that same understanding?
I think it sounds very very similar to the journey map, and
Yeah.
that really figuring out what happens after the sale. So they say yes, then what? And the first thing we need to figure out is what does the outcome look like? What does success look like? And what are the steps along the way? So what is the first win that we can deliver? Uh, and for a number of our clients, they're product led, meaning somebody goes to a website, reads about the product, they've got a 14-day trial or
Hmm.
um, whatever it may be, a free version forever, and you want them to upgrade, but they sign up for that and figure out, what does that look like? What is the first win? How quickly can you deliver that? And what is it? What do they want when they're signing up? And I think the same thing is true for any business. Somebody says yes. What is it that they want? What does success look like to them? What is a win? And how can we deliver a really quick win that makes them look really smart that they chose you? And whether that is
Yeah.
something that is for them, is it for their team, is it for their organization? What's going to give them that dopamine hit, and how quickly can we do it? Another one to look at is, where do they get stuck? So if the old
Friction point.
onboarding, and our process is matured over the years, but the way we used to onboard customers, intelligent contacts, was they would sign, awesome, welcome. Here's this form to fill out of all the things that we need to get your system set up. How great an experience is that? I mean,
Yeah.
that's terrible. And then we got smart
Thank you
and we
for
made it
giving us
where it's
money. Here's your
yes,
homework.
yes. And then we got smart and said, okay, now it's online. Like that's a horrible experience. How can we take the information that we already know and pre-populate it? How can we have somebody, one of our team members, have a conversation with somebody? Because we live in this world. We can send it to them, and they're like, I don't understand what this means. But have somebody just ask them questions in plain English. We know what we need, but it
Yeah.
was all for our convenience, not for theirs. And I think flipping that around and figuring out, what is it like, to walk in and, to know some, but to not have all the answers. How can we help them provide the answers? How can we have suggestions of, if you don't know, here's a great place to start. Here's what most of our clients do. How does that sound to you? And you're really getting their buy-in and walking them through it. Gives them a whole lot more confidence than, here, fill this out.
Yeah, that's great. It's funny because we actually do that internally as well with clients, because we'll be talking to,
Yeah.
the functional leaders, and we'll talk about like, what does great look like? And have you mapped your internal processes to understand how you're serving your internal team? And we find that, if you start internally and you fix your own ship, it tends to just become a natural thing to think about the customer as well. So
Yes.
it's, you're all in service to others is the mindset.
I love that. Yeah, it's really important to think about that and make it where it's tangible, not
Yeah.
great. What is great? What does great look like? Give me some examples of that. When this happens, then do this. And when you have that kind of a mindset, and you understand, oh, hey, I recognize this. Now I know what I need to go do next, and then I know what I need to do next. Or when somebody gets stuck, the stuck points for a lot of our clients are the same. And so when it's product led, it's pretty easy. Somebody signs up for something, they start using the solution, and then the number of logins or the usage drops off after day 3. Huh? Why is that? Well, they got stuck somewhere. And I've had that happen when I sign up for something and I'm trying to figure it out,
Sure.
and waiting on a response from support, and I'll go sign up for something else, and I'll actually be using it before support ever gets back to me to answer my question. And
Yep.
what company am I going with? So, fixing that, figuring out where things are stuck. And one of the most genius things that I've seen is in one of those stuck points. And it was something that was predictable, and they're working on fixing it. But what they did in the interim, and they ended up keeping this, is at that point, they would actually, when somebody got to that point, say, hey, here's where you are, here's the next step. Would you like us to do that for you, or do you have it? And it's one of those things of like, wow, yes, I want you to just to do it for me because that seems like it's hard. It wasn't for the company. It was really easy because they understood what was supposed to happen. But from a user standpoint, they would get there and kind of get stuck, just analysis paralysis. I'm not sure what to do next. This next step seems a little bit difficult. And by just picking that one thing up, their stick rate, after the trial, doubled. And so it's just that one small thing that you can do, and it has massive results.
You bring up a really good point because the constant analysis, the A/B testing, going through, you have to be testing at all times. But how do you identify the big win versus the small incremental gains and get to a point where you go, you know what, that test is the one that really mattered? I've found that some companies, when they're smaller, they can test so many different things, you almost sub-optimize. And in SaaS, there's so much data. How do you protect yourself from sub-optimizing?
That's a tough one. And I think sometimes you don't know unless you test. And so how do you protect yourself? I think you run a lot of tests.
Mm,
You try a lot of things. And so two things happen. One is those small wins add up. And so those will stack.
yep.
And sometimes in doing that and just seeing, what is that thing that we're doing? Um, and you'll find something that really does move the needle. On the other
Yeah.
side, if you do just a few experiments and you're like big and you think that they're really going to go well and none of them do, you've wasted a lot of time. And sometimes one of those, will be a big hit. So I'm saying, I'm not saying don't swing for the fences because I think that everybody should. I mean, we're all entrepreneurs. We want to anyway,
Hmm.
but don't neglect the small things because those small things add up. And especially if you look at an overall value chain, well, if you optimize, just conversions, for example, product led in the beginning, what if you could get an extra 10%? Well, now you've got 10% more people to upsell. You've got 10% more people for services, for additional products. I mean, there's just fixing that one small thing. You're like, it's just 10% more, but it affects the entire value chain. And so I
Yeah.
think don't underestimate those small changes because they add up and they stack.
I love it. There's so much good stuff here because normally we talk about your leaders list, but there's so much good stuff that you've given everybody else to put on their leaders list and be thinking about that. One of the subjects that you often talk about is just how do you future proof? And you talked about this earlier, so many of the companies that are technology companies, they're dealing with constant change. AI is changing everything. How
Yes.
does a company, especially an SMB, how do you manage and future proof your organization with so much change taking place?
It's probably harder now than it ever has.
I
But I
agree with
think,
that.
some of it is that mindset and iterating faster. So if there is a skill that is probably one of the most important to have, not only as a leader but for your entire team, is adaptability, because things are changing faster than ever. And if you're stuck in we have to do it this way or this is the market, this is the way it works, I think it's very easy to be left behind. And so being very flexible and adaptable to change. But yeah, how do you position, for fast iteration and to be future proofed, to be around for a long time? And I think I'll give you three things. One is to define your customer success milestones and with precision. I talked a little bit about that earlier, but
Hmm.
what does that success look like 30, 60, 90 days? Write it down and get super specific and measurable and make that your North Star for sales, for delivery, for customer success, product development, everything. What how do we deliver those wins quickly? The second would be to build an operating system, not just track metrics. A lot of times companies will try and scale recurring value with spreadsheets and good intentions. And you need a system that's lightweight, ideally something software enabled that tracks the things that actually drive enterprise value. And we use 8 key drivers, and it's based on 55,000 plus actual transactions. It's not just theory, but pattern recognition from real data on what makes a business valuable and sustainable. I think that's really important, is to do that. But again, it has to be lightweight or nobody's going to use it. The greatest operating system in the world, nobody uses it, then it's kind of useless.
Yeah.
And the third one is having expertise. The expertise you're missing, and find your people. And like I wrote about in the captain's keys. But scaling, 1 to 10, it's different skills than 0 to 1. 10 to 50,
Yeah.
it's again different skills than scrappy growth. And having that expertise, having the people around you who've done it before, super helpful. And
Mhm.
then, like we said before, the community of leaders are in the same fight, sharing what's working now, and not trying to do it in isolation. And I think those three change how you think, how you operate, and most importantly, how investors will value your business. At the end of the day, enterprise value is the scoreboard.
Mhm. And so when do you take companies through valuation, or do you so one of the things Proxy does is helps people establish what their valuation is and then show them that operational excellence actually changes the value. And so we
Yes,
take them through that process. Is it similar to how you do it?
yes, that's exactly right. Is if you're trying to get somewhere, the first thing that we need to know is, where are you now?
Yep.
If you don't know where you're starting from, then probably any direction will work. But that's where the first thing we need to understand is, where are you today,
Uh-huh.
and really doing an assessment of the business. What's working really well, what's kind of working okay, and maybe what's broken. And we want to fix what's broken, but it may not be the most important thing. There may be some other things, and we've got a very specific order that we do things in, because order matters. Order of operations makes all the difference. It's kind of like baking a cake. You can't start by putting the pan in the oven. You've got to start getting the ingredients out and mixing them together. So
Yeah.
order actually does make a big difference. But that's where we start, is figuring out what are the things that where are you today, and what's going to move the needle the most. And just like we're looking for those wins, 30, 60, 90 days, what's going to
Mhm.
move the needle the most in the next 30 days? And then how do we do that and get as much out of that as we possibly can, and then start looking at others. So we do that and work in 6-week cycles.
I love it. That's interesting. We do as well
Uh,
from a starting perspective. We look at the 6 weeks methodical approach and refer to that as speed to trust, because
Love that.
the faster you can get to a trust base, the more you understand why you're both doing what you're doing. And so
Exactly.
it's about just proving people, right? Proving to people, like I said what I was going to do, and I did what I said I was going to do. So
And that creates a future-proof business.
yeah, that's great. So what are the common mistakes? What does everybody screw up when they try and take on this SaaS mindset? What are we gonna all go, oh damn, I paid the dumb tax?
Yeah, I love that term, dumb tax. And
That's
I have
totally
paid
stolen from
so much.
Greg Alexander, by the way, at Collective 54. He gave me that, and I love it.
That's a great one.
Yeah.
The biggest mistake, I would say, probably slapping a subscription on an existing offering and calling it transformation. It happens a
Okay.
lot. I see that a lot with professional services firms. They've got incredible expertise, they have real IP, they have legitimate value, and they read about recurring revenue and they get excited and launch kind of a SaaS-like subscription,
Yeah.
but nothing else changes. Same delivery model, same metrics, same team structure, and they're just billing monthly now. And what happens is, sometimes they have good success in the beginning, customers sign up and then realize it's the same service with different billing, and churn out, 3 months later, 6 months later.
Mm.
And the CEO, this is a good one. Probably heard it, and it's yeah, there is some truth to it. They'll say, well, it's subscription fatigue or it's market fit. But the real problem is that they never redesign the experience for ongoing measurable value. Mm.
Man,
A
I couldn't agree with you more. Uh, we if you truly have a subscription business, you have to constantly be thinking about next check-in. How am I going to think ahead of what that challenge might be for them?
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, I mean, we use growth stages, when we work with companies, because just like you said, there's SaaS numbers. The challenge when somebody's at a $1 million business versus
Yes.
a $10 million. And so yeah, we see the exact same thing. We tend to see it in staff size. So
Yeah.
when a company goes from 25 people, there's just natural challenges with adding more people. And then, you see the same thing at 75, 150, 250.
Yep.
There are just big, natural, painful moments as you're going through that. So with this change and saying, okay, I'm just going to slap a subscription fee on, we know that's not going to work. Any other things that are big watch outs that executives should start thinking about right now?
I think maybe copying SaaS metrics without really understanding what's underneath that. So
Hmm.
go to the subscription model and you start tracking MRR and churn rate. Because
Hmm.
I read it in a blog post, what you're supposed to do, right?
Right.
But they haven't built the onboarding systems, health scoring, customer success motion, feedback loop that actually move the numbers. It could be that they do have a feedback loop. This is another big one, and this is across the board. Is we get that feedback and we don't do anything with it. So we get it and like, all right, yay, we have a good NPS score or whatever it is, but we're getting that feedback, but we don't act on it. We don't really
Yep.
start looking for that. We look for the good and kind of like, all right, yeah, the other stuff, or focus on the bad and like, wow, we've got a long way to go, and but not prioritizing those and what's going to have the most value. Um, could be top line growth without building the retention foundation. So again, you can't scale a leaky bucket. You got a bunch of things, coming in the door and then, falling right out, and investors will see through that pretty quick.
For sure.
Valuation multiple kind of stays flat because the business model is fundamentally unpredictable because, whatever comes in, just falls right out. It's, SaaS, the model is not a business model that you just adopt. It's a discipline that you commit to. And I think it fundamentally changes the way you think about the business, how you track those numbers, and the why behind it.
Yeah. It, one of the things that I see a lot is a misunderstanding of how valuable documenting and having access to proof is. We talk about artifacts of proof all the time. And
Mm, good.
it's kind of funny how CEOs will often talk to them and they will go, yeah, 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 we did that. And they
Right.
remember that they did it and it becomes institutional knowledge for the 2 or 3 people that touched it, but they just don't communicate out. And so that comes back to your point about like the challenge between you and your leadership team. That's one thing. But your
Yeah.
leadership team and the telephone game that can happen by the time it goes 2, 3, 4 layers deep, that's a very those artifacts of proof become so incredibly important in communicating that. So that's just I would add that to our listeners leaders list
That's
as well
big.
as documenting success as you go through that.
Yeah. I think that's
So
even easier today than it has been traditionally, where
never been easier.
documentation. Yes, yes,
Yeah,
with video and AI and there's so much that can be done, and you can have great documentation of an entire process without having to sit down and think about it and write steps and all that stuff like the old days.
yeah. Hey, no, we don't all have to go write a book, but
Yeah, we just do it.
you're in the process, and one of the things that we find is a lot of people as they start going through this process and they get methodical and they get intentional, they're essentially writing
Mm.
the book. They are
Yeah,
start, and so it really those things. If you intentional and you move from we always talk about moving from intuition to intent. Like there's good gut leaders who just naturally know it, and then there's intentional leaders who start to put the plan in place, they run the plan, they test against it, and they're like yourself. They get to a point where they go, I now know why I'm successful
it's
because
so important.
I was intentional about it.
That's a tough one, and I think that's why a lot of founders they may have success once, but then it's really hard to find it again. They always seem to be chasing the next one and can't quite seem to crack it because they don't really understand why they were successful,
Yeah.
or that that one thing that I was really good at doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work the same way. But kind of being able to unpack that and really understanding, really, really important, understanding the why behind it.
Yeah. I agree. So, Jeff, this has been fantastic. I mean, there's so much great information to be able to pack into the leaders list, and the question always becomes prioritization, right? What should I
Of
do
course.
first? So, for the folks that are out there that are, they're scaling their company, they're, anywhere from 25 employees to 250, they're in that stage where they're scaling up, just like yourself in your company. What are the things that you would say, hey, we're done here. I'm finished listening to this. I got great stuff from Jeff, but I'm going to go do this right now. What's the first thing you'd say go do?
I say the first thing you do is really look at your customer experience. There aren't that many moats left anymore. And I think if, customer experience is probably one of those, certainly for a while longer. Uh,
Yep.
and the big reason is because most of the other leaders are not going to go do it. And so if you're one of the ones that actually does do that and look at that, I mean, the journey map, I think that's absolutely brilliant. I love that you brought that up. Really understand what is that journey before they come into your world, and that buy time is just the midpoint of their journey. It's not the end. And I think a lot of us will map the buyer journey and like woohoo, across the finish line. That's the beginning, and it's the beginning of phase two. And so
Yeah.
really understand what does that look like, because I think that can really become a moat. The second one is community. What are you doing to rally your customers together and get them together and get them sharing knowledge and make them feel connected to your brand and to something bigger than just, they're isolated as well. So how are you getting them connected? I think that community can be another great mode, at least again for a while. We'll see what happens. Business is moving fast. So, look
It's a
for those
great
modes.
idea, though. Like, is that like a customer advisory board, or do you see that as a larger, like, literal association for a company? How do companies do that?
I think it could be either one. The more you can do that involves your customers together, and whether that's a group or an association or appreciation or getting them together, it kind of depends on if they're local or remote.
Hmm.
But figure out a way that you can get people together in the same room for having great face to face conversations and learning from each other. And I think that's and I say face to face conversations. You can do it virtually as well. Nothing wrong with that. There's certainly some good virtual meetups. If you can do it face to face, I think that creates much stronger bonds. And in an AI world and a Zoom world and online everything, the people to people connections have so much more value, and I think we'll see that continue to increase.
Yeah, that's great. That's great input, Jeff. This has been fantastic. I just want to say thank you again for being on the leaders list.
Thank you, Brian. It's great being here.